Hey guys, I'm John. Welcome back to my shop. In this video you'll see me cut the dados for the bottom of the box, size the bottom panel, and then salvage the lid after making a really dumb mistake. Let's just call it a design feature. Hope you enjoy it. In order to fit the bottom of the box, I first had to cut dados in all four sides. Someday I hope to make a drawer bottom plane, which would have been perfect for this, but since I don't have one yet, I just used my router plane with a fence on it. I'd also really like to get a tail vise. I had to get a bit creative with the work holding on this one. The next step was to clean up the bottom panel and then cut it to size. I started by squaring one edge and then measured for the length directly off of the dados. I want a nice tight fit along the length of the panel and a bit of room for expansion across the width. The shooting board gave me a nice square end and helped dial in the fit. I used my trusty finger gauge to mark out the chamfers for what is essentially a raised panel on the bottom of the box. My low angle block plane helped me to dial in the fit so it was just right. I tested the piece and then assembled the box to make sure that the panel fit well. The next step in the process that I used and sadly can't recommend is to royally screw up your measurements just to prove that you are a competent woodworker and can fix your mistakes. I guess this one just wasn't challenging enough for me. I took careful measurements of the assembled box, and you can even see I wrote them down, which would have given me great results had I stuck to them. Because the lid was book matched, I wanted to have it centered on the box, so I measured from the glue line, and that's where everything went wrong. The overall width was supposed to be 5.5 inches, so naturally I knew that I'd have to go 2.5 inches on either side to make 5, but then made the mistake of subtracting 1/4 inch from each side instead of adding it. As I test the fit, realization of my mistake is setting in, and the phrase, "measure twice, cut once," went through my head for the next several days. Here I am looking around for someone else to blame. Just me. Well, as bad as I would like to pretend that I'm a perfect woodworker, I'm not. And as you can see, I've got a little problem here. I don't know what happened. My brain was just not engaged, and my lid is about 1 inch too small. So I've thought about a lot of different options, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to rip it down the middle again since it's book matched, and I'm going to take another piece of cherry and kind of inlay that in the middle and make it a feature. So sometimes that's what woodworking is about. It's finding fixes to the issues that come up. That it's inevitable. You're going to mess up, and you got to find a way to fix it sometimes. So thought about trying to hide that and make it look like I hadn't had that mistake, but nobody's going to learn from that. So there it is in all its glory, and we'll see how it turns out. I cut a piece of cherry down on the table saw, making it thicker than the lid stock, and then cut some rabbets for the maple to sit beneath. I took it back to the bench and cleaned up the ridges left by the table saw blade with a shoulder plane. I took the lid that I worked so hard to get nicely book matched over to the bandsaw and cut it in half. Back at the bench, I jointed the edges of the maple lid so that they could be glued to the cherry strip that I was going to put in the middle. To be perfectly honest, I'm happier with this fix than I would have been with a plain lid, and it reinforced some valuable lessons for me. I break out the finger gauge again and do some layout so I can shape the center section of the lid. Those finger gauges sure are handy. Next, I used a block plane, a card scraper, and a chisel to shape the center section of the lid. Now I can finally glue this lid together. Put a small bead of glue on the cherry and then clamp the lid together. I use a short section of straw to clean up any glue squeeze out from the corner between the cherry and the maple. After cleaning up the ends on the shooting board, I finally get the fit I was looking for. I decided to add another splash of cherry to the front edge of the lid with a small tab for a handle to lift it. I ripped that piece a little thinner than the maple and then glued it to the front of the lid. While I waited for that glue to dry, I began working on the hinge mechanism. I considered a lot of options, but because the side and lid are so thin, I didn't think that screws on a typical hinge would provide enough holding power. I opted to use some 1/8" brass rod instead, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. I used a pair of dividers to mark out the location of the rod on the lid and on the end of the box. I then deepened the mark with a birdcage awl. Using dividers ensures consistent spacing, which is critical for the hinge to work well. I used an 1/8" drill bit to drill the holes, with a piece of painter's tape on the bit as a depth gauge. I put a small square next to the workpiece as a reference to help me stay plumb as I drilled the holes. Next, I grabbed my hacksaw and cut off a short length of brass rod, then cleaned up the ends with a file. Once the glue was dry on the lid, I took it over to the bandsaw and cut out the profile on the front. These small relief cuts make it easier for a wide blade to get around the curves. I moved over to the oscillating spindle sander and cleaned up any marks left by the bandsaw. Next, it was back to the bench to do some final shaping and cleanup with a spoke shave, file, and some sandpaper. I've had a good time documenting this process, although it's a bit embarrassing to mess up on camera. I hope you've enjoyed watching it come together. Don't forget to give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any of the new videos that I post. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave those in the comments section down below, and I'll do my best to answer those. Keep an eye out for my next video where I'll glue the box together and then apply the finish to close it out. Really appreciate you watching and hope that it inspires you to get out in your shop and make something that challenges you. See you in the next one.